Addicts. Darlene is our reader for How Do I Choose a Prospective Sponsor? What if the person I asked to be my sponsor declines? How do we decide to become a sponsor? Darlene, would you please unmute and identify yourself?
Okay, I'm Darlene, love addict. How do I choose a prospective sponsor? Sponsors preferably have solid abstinence from their addictive patterns and are willing to guide the sponsee through the 12 steps. A sponsor has their own experience of recovery, having found sobriety. They may not have completed all the steps, but they will ideally be at least one step ahead of a sponsee. A prospective sponsor's time and experience in the program is just one criterion that can be used to select a sponsor. As we attend a variety of meetings and SLAA recovery, events, we seek members who possess qualities or characters, assets that inspire and appeal to us. Below are suggestions to consider when selecting a prospective sponsor. Does this person have the qualities that I would like to have? Will this person be honest with me and appropriately point out my areas of denial? Can I trust them with my secrets? Do I feel safe with this person? Can this person discuss their own experiences rather than give advice? Does the prospective sponsor have a sponsor? Am I comfortable with their communication style? Do our schedules align? How much time do they spend with me? A sponsor is a fellow addict. It is important that a sponsor is receiving guidance from their own sponsor or another experienced member. Step 1 affirms that we are powerless over sex and love addiction. We're not likely to recover on our own. We need help from a source outside of ourselves. Therefore, it is vital that we seek help from our higher power and a sponsor. It is helpful to know what literature, workbooks, or readings this prospective sponsor will use when you choose to work together. Some sponsors may prefer to use only SLAA conference-approved literature. Others may choose to include non-SLAA literature from other 12-step programs or from well-established recovery authors. Historically, it was suggested that men sponsor men sponsor men and women sponsor women. However, we acknowledge that gender and attraction can take many forms. When selecting a sponsor, we ideally avoid choosing a person with whom intrigue or fantasy could arise. We need to be completely honest and ask ourselves if we're attracted to this person, as this could jeopardize our sobriety. If we see our sponsor as a potential sexual partner or as someone we might obsess over, this would completely undermine the primary purpose of the sponsor relationship. Often, the lens of our addiction distorts our own perception and motivations. This is why it's critical to discuss any attraction to a prospective sponsor with the other experienced members and ask our higher power for guidance. Schedule compatibility is another consideration. Does the prospective sponsor have time for us on a regular basis? Does that time align with our own availability? For this reason, a temporary sponsorship is sometimes suggested. Working together for 30 to 60 days allows us to see if the relationship suits both people. We will need to agree on the amount of time communicating and types of communication, such as face-to-face, phone calls, videos, or emails. The frequency of the contact is determined jointly by the sponsor and the sponsee as we each become familiar with our own individual needs and boundaries. Once we have found a sponsor, we commit ourselves to maintaining regular contact with that person. The sponsor, in turn, helps us stay on course by guiding us through the steps and applying the principles of the program, including the 5 major resources: sobriety, sponsorship, steps, service, and spirituality, as mentioned in the SLAA preamble. If we do not attend in-person meetings, you may wish to express your desire for a sponsor during a phone or online meeting. Many meetings have allotted time for sponsorship requests, fellowship, discussion, and questions. Don't just wait for a sponsor to appear and say, "You're ready, they're ready." Make sure you ask. Member share. I got my first sponsor around after I worked step 7. There were 3 that I would call failed relationships. After that, I recognized I needed to do something differently. The first sponsee ended because of a schedule conflict from both of us. The other didn't want to work the steps and to use a different workbook. The third was what I was getting too invested and emotional from a sponsee who called me every day for an extended length of time. It helped me learn to set out guidelines, expectations, and boundaries with a potential sponsee and let them know we would do a 30-day temporary relationship. If during the 30 days we found that it was not working for either of us, we could part ways on good terms. The 30-day trial helps me see how interested the sponsee is or ready they are to do the work. I suggest to help them in their recovery, along with seeing our schedules, to see if our schedules align. Member share. As a straight woman coming into the program, I would have easily wanted a male sponsor right away because that is who I connect with. I get my validation from men. I think I really needed to learn and be reminded that a sponsor of the same sex as a heterosexual woman is the right choice. I found my second current sponsor through SLIA online, and she lives almost 3,000 miles away. What if the person I asked to be my sponsor declines? Sometimes the person we ask to be our sponsor declines. Although disappointed, we need to remember that this is not a personal rejection. This member may simply not be available to us at this time for any number of reasons. They may be available they may already have too many, they may already have too many service responsibilities, maybe setting boundaries, or simply practicing self-care by saying no. We trust our higher power is taking an active role and requires only that we continue to pray for guidance. Don't give up. Finding the right sponsor requires patience and persistence. We believe that our higher power guides our choices, and there's no rejection when someone we ask to be a sponsor declines. Continue attending meetings, talking to members of the fellowship, and developing recovery partners. Member share. I wanted what Dominic had, and I had interviewed and evaluated very few good candidates, all of whom are still good recovery buddies of mine years later. But none of them had the serenity while still holding themselves strictly accountable for their actions and motivations as Dominic did. Dominic was not available to take on another sponsee when I asked him, but since I found the person wanted to be my sponsor, I was willing to wait for 5 or 6 months if I had to. After a few weeks, another one of his sponsees unexpectedly dropped out of the program, and Dominic let me know he was available, and he has been my sponsor ever since. How do we decide to become a sponsor? As for when to become a sponsor, Step 12 tells us that having had this spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to sex and love addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Spiritual awakening happens often gradually for each person working the steps. In working the steps, we come to realize that our acting out behavior was rooted in selfishness, but we continue our journey. We found that our long-term recovery depends on the service we provide to others, that compassion and selflessness nurtures our spirits. Eventually, we learn that we can't keep the gift of sobriety ourselves unless we give it away. And sponsoring others is a great way to do that. Sponsorship is one of the most important ways to give back to the program while we continue to freely receive. Each of us makes the decision to sponsor when the time is right. Perhaps a newcomer asks us to be their sponsor. Perhaps our own sponsor suggests we're ready, or we simply must have a sense of readiness to be of service. Other experienced members can help us support in this decision. There is no one answer as to when the time is right to sponsor. Some have suggested that we can sponsor up to the step we have completed. Other members of the fellowship start sponsoring after step 7, or we may want to wait until we have completed step 12. We recommend talking with your own sponsor about when the time to sponsor is right for you.
Thank you, Darlene. I appreciate you taking that long section on. All right, next, I would like to introduce Clay, who will now share for 10 minutes on these topics. Will the timekeeper please time 10 minutes with a 1-minute warning? After the share is over, the group will have up to 10 minutes to ask them questions. Clay, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Clark. There's a number of questions here. I'll just review them first. I've been asked to speak on how my sponsor and I met. Let's see how. Maybe I can get these questions. I'm having some trouble. If we've parted ways and how that went, and a difficult situation and how I resolved it with a sponsor or sponsee. So on this first one, how did we meet? I have a variety of different sponsors and have at different times. So answering this question is a little complex. So we're going to get into a bunch of different things here. In 2 separate in-person meetings in the metro area where I live, that's where I met both my first sponsor, who was a temporary sponsor, and my sponsor of about 5 years. The temporary sponsor was a regular attendee of a meeting that I sometimes attend and don't attend now, but he helped me get started by guiding me through the Setting Bottom Lines pamphlet. And that's the pamphlet that I use, and I use with my sponsees now to define my sobriety. That temporary sponsor encouraged me to find a more permanent sponsor because from the outset, it was clear that he was available to be only a temporary sponsor to me. This is also a situation that goes in the area of, choosing a sponsor. Should they be of a different gender, same gender, stuff like that. I believe that because this person identified as a man who saw me potentially as a female, which I'm a non-binary person, but still perception is that it may be pretty clear that him gaining enough sobriety and recovery in the program to be entering a marriage, that he probably shouldn't be sponsoring someone that he believed was a female. So, like I said, straight up temporary sponsorship from the get-go. I did find a more permanent sponsor. Both my temporary sponsor and my permanent sponsor, I chose them because the shares that they were sharing in the room told me that they had the kind of recovery that I was looking for. My sponsor and I are both regular attendees of my SLAA home group. And on the surface, it would seem that my sponsor and I don't have much in common at all. But hearing him share made it clear that we have a lot of patterns of love addiction in common. I also heard a lot of my own patterns of sexual acting out in his shares. So because I heard so much recovery in his shares and had, seen and heard that he'd been at this for a long time and he wasn't going anywhere, I asked him to be my sponsor. And I've been working the steps and the tradition and keeping my recovery on track ever since. That's been about 5 years now that he's been my sponsor. My sponsor prefers to work with sponsees in person, and I live out of the area 5 months out of the year. So a few years ago, while I was working Step 8 for the first time, which was a really tough step for me, it became clear that I needed to also find a long-distance sponsor to help me continue with my step work despite being away from my home area for the season. So I met my long-distance sponsor in a meeting as well, a telephone meeting that, to my knowledge, has since disbanded, but being able to lean on that long distance sponsor while I was away from home was essential to keeping my momentum going on my step work. Without that, I'm sure I could have easily let my recovery take a backseat to other things and maybe would have slipped back into my addiction. So I also have an anorexia co-sponsor. I met my anorexia co-sponsor in a meeting also, an online meeting that actually neither of us still attend. And like that long distance sponsor, and actually all of my sponsees now, we work together via phone and usually across a number of time zones, sometimes across an ocean. So that is how I met my sponsors. I have parted ways with a sponsor. So moving on to this next question about how we parted ways. For the temporary sponsor, it was very easy because that was set up that way in advance. It was very clear that I was going to work with this sponsor just for a specific time, just until basically I found a more permanent sponsor, and that was part of the sponsorship. There was that encouragement to find a more permanent sponsor. In a way, and that was easy because it was set up in advance. So there was no issues there. In a way, I part with my permanent sponsor every year because I move away for the season, and we can't meet in person anymore. So there's always this kind of loose connection there that has periodic disruptions every year. And that goes pretty smoothly. We try to stay connected via Zoom when we can't get together, even if we are just 6 miles away. The DC area, it can take you 45 minutes to get 6 miles. So there's always kind of a parting and reconnection that happens there. With my long distance sponsor, that was a little bit more rocky, parting ways. It was challenging for me because I got the sense that, she really kind of depended to some degree or, received benefits from having me as a sponsee. And I'm not saying that as, that I'm so great to have as a sponsee or anything like that, but I can definitely say as a sponsor, losing a sponsee is not easy. So I recognize that. And it was difficult to be able to muster the courage to let her know that it felt to me like that our sponsorship relationship had run its course and that I had received everything that I needed to, that I was meant to, and was going to receive from that relationship. So that sponsorship relationship did end. And I'm still working with my anorexia co-sponsor now, so we have not parted ways on that. A difficult situation, I have frequently difficult situations that arise with either a sponsor, co-sponsor, or sponsees. One of them with the long distance sponsor that I spoke about was that she was really great at having advice available and on the ready and gave it freely. And that sometimes conflicted with my need for being heard. And I actually needed to ask her. I needed to speak up and advocate for myself, let her know that I really needed to be heard, that she was going to be of more value to me by stopping her talking and offering of advice and just listen to me. And it was difficult to speak up like that, but I did, and she took it to heart. She really made an effort, and even would acknowledge that, like, that I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to listen to you, and that kind of thing. So it gave me it reinforced that courageous step that I took to speak up for myself. And it helped me understand that if I do speak up for myself, sometimes I can be heard, my requests can be honored, and people can try and work toward a change that benefits us both. So that was really wonderful, even though it was really difficult to speak up that way. I've had difficult situations with prospective sponsees in like there being just a thank you. I hear that in a conflict about how to work the steps or availability. Everybody's got different ideas about how their sponsor should interact with them or how their sponsee should interact with them. And it's important to get all that ironed out, of course, because I deal with anorexia. I tend to be somewhat conflict avoidant, but this sponsoring in this program gives me an opportunity to work on my recovery from anorexia as well. So there's definitely something in it for the sponsors. Don't let anybody tell you any differently. That's my share. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Clay. For anyone who has questions, please raise your virtual hand and Clay will call on you. Will the timekeeper please let us know when 10 minutes have elapsed?
And I'm on mute, so Georgie could not hear me say that I see their hand. Georgie, please unmute.
Hi. So I'm fairly new. I think I've been to about a couple in-person sessions and a few online ones. So I'm now thinking about getting a sponsor. So I wrote some bottom lines today. I guess I'm just a bit worried because of the vulnerability that I feel at the moment. I suppose I'm just wondering, how do you reach out for a sponsor firstly? And how do you make sure that it will work for you and assert those boundaries? Because that's something I find very hard. But yeah.
So I apologize, Georgie. Your question is about boundaries. Is that correct?
And my question is about finding a sponsor, but also making sure that, especially as a newcomer to this, like it's very vulnerable, and making sure that sponsor-sponsee relationship is a safe one and is works for you. And that kind of enacting boundaries. And, if you feel like someone's taking advantage or whatever, or, it's hard to put, it's just something I'm thinking about. But thanks.
So what I have learned very painfully is that I need to take the time to build trust with someone that I'm meeting and someone that I'm interacting with for the first time. I don't get very good results when I don't remember to build that trust over time, and instead I just give trust sort of blindly. So if I may offer a suggestion to you, Georgie, maybe take the time, invest in yourself to build that trust with someone new over time. I hope that helps. I'm seeing Tanya.
Hi, Clay. Thanks for your share. I guess my question is, I started 3 recovery programs. It'll be 2 years in May. And I've had 3 sponsors in this program. And I also identify as anorexic. And I just finished the anorexia 12 steps with a co-sponsorship group. So I have co-sponsorship. And I lost my 3rd sponsor during the holidays. And it's all, I didn't drive him away. 1 left fellowship, one relapsed, and 1 has to take care of her mother out of town. I just feel like I have a bad run with sponsors. I'm on step 7 in the SLA workbook, and I'm just curious, and my last sponsor was anorexia focus, and she also suggested I should get a dating sponsor because I'm supposed to start sober dating literally today. I'm going to post my ad online and start doing that again. But do I need to look for a sponsor? I was like, I'll wait. And then I saw the flyer for this and I said, I'll wait and go to this and see, because I feel like I just have a bad luck with sponsors here. I don't know if I'm doing co-sponsorship and outreach, and, maybe if I have a couple of sober dating fellow travelers, I'm sort of like, I feel like I open up and put all this stuff out there. So it's like, do I need to get another sponsor? And also, what is the general feeling? So far, I've been able to continue. I don't want to get a new sponsor who wants me to take me back to step 1. I want to continue. I've answered all those workbook questions and finished that 7 through 12. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that. Thanks.
All right. So I'm going to tackle your do I need a sponsor question. Oh boy, that's a big one. And it's one that for me, I need to take to my higher power. My sponsor said something to me early on in the program that scared the heck out of me. He told me that I need to do whatever is necessary to keep my sobriety, to remain unhooked from the addiction. And that was scary because I was like, oh my gosh, what kind of lengths am I going to have to go to here? And because I was like, I had no boundaries. There was no length, that I was thinking if my sponsor tells me to do X, then, oh my gosh, am I going to have to do X? And I was not hearing him. I was not hearing him say, go to any lengths to keep me sober. If I am sober, maybe I'm already going to all the lengths that I need to go to. If I'm not sober, then yeah, I need the help of a sponsor. And I don't want to be one of those boomerangs that always is coming in and going out. And so I stay hooked into the program. I stay hooked into sponsorship. That said, I don't let a sponsor run my life. My higher power runs the show, not some other human being. So that would be what I'd have to share about do I need a sponsor, Tanya. Thanks for the question.
Thanks.
I see Ashley.
Hi, Ashley, Sex and Love Addict. Just a very quick question. Will we at any point in this workshop be able to potentially talk with some others about potentially being a sponsor for us? Or is this workshop primarily just how to go about getting a sponsor, or if you wanted to be a sponsor?
Yeah, answer that. Most of the content is, there will be opportunities to exchange information during the break and at the end of the meeting with potential sponsors to outreach to people for sure. But most of the content is not centered on that, but there certainly will be opportunities for that. And shoot me a private message if I can be more specific.
Thanks, Clark. Gregory.
Hi, Gregory, Sex and Love Addict. So there are two things I was wondering about when you were speaking, and thank you for your experience. You were talking about building trust. And if you could expand on that, because that's been I just get it, right away. And so what are healthy ways that you learned how to build trust with others? And then the second question, as a person who identifies as non-binary, do you believe that the literature speaks to you and then is inclusive in making sure that your non-binary status is also included in the literature?
Thanks. I'm going to tackle that literature question first, Gregory. I think that it's growing ever more inclusive every day. Having worked on writing groups and with various committees focused on literature, we're starting to remove the really just clunky she/he / thing in a lot of ways, and just generally referring to people as people. So even if there might be some more outdated literature out there where I don't feel so much inclusion, I can see every day that it's growing. So that gives me a lot of hope. On your question about building trust, for me, it was kind of a painful process to start taking relationships more slowly because in my active addiction, my kind of go-to default is to have a lot of preconceived notions or maybe even, a fantasy image ideal of what this particular relationship will be, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or this thing called sponsorship that I had no idea what the heck that was. There's a lot of stuff in this fellowship and just in 12-step in general, because this is my first 12-step fellowship, that when I came in, I was like, nobody seems to have set definitions on this stuff, and it all sounds a little bit culty to me. I don't know what's going on with this. So I didn't have a lot of trust to start with. I needed to dip my toe in the water slowly just to be sure that it was okay for me to like hitch my wagon to this thing. And so that fantasy ideal or those preconceived notions about what this relationship will be, that drove me toward the blind trust side of things. So that's where I've started to figure out that like, fantasy addiction is one of my things too, so that I can drop the illusions about, oh yeah, a sponsor, that's somebody who will totally get me sober and recovered and serene. It's not how that works. It's been painful, doing the work of the all the questions that are included in the sober dating questions for discussion guide, and just having a sponsor and going through that process of learning to deal with having a sponsor-sponsee relationship helped me learn how to relate to others.
That's 10 minutes.
Thank you. Do we have time for Raul's question?
Raul, can you be quick? We can squeeze you.
Yeah, I can definitely be quick. Hi, I'm Raul, Sex and Love Addict. Hi, Clay, thank you so much for your share. That was really awesome. Mine is not really a question, but more something like a segue to a comment that you made about giving advice. My profession involves giving advice a lot. And one of the things that I learned kind of, difficultly is that my sponsees don't necessarily want to hear advice. They want to hear my own experience, strength, and hope. And I just had to, over time realize that particular trait that I have in my profession doesn't necessarily translate into being a sponsor. Even though my profession gives me tools which are really very helpful to be a sponsor, that is not one of the ones that I really cannot use. And it took me a long, long time, to take that to heart and to learn it. That's it.
Thank you for the comment, Raul. And if I may say, in my experience, a way for me to convey the message of what might otherwise be advice to someone who I think might need or benefit by hearing it is to couch it in terms of my experience and let them take what they like and leave the rest. Thank you, everybody, for your questions.
Thank you, Clay.